Hey, welcome back to the channel. Today, I'll be sharing a story with you. The movie begins in a secluded area in Japan. Ryu and Ken can be seen standing in a field, gearing up for their training with their master Goken. While training intensively together, Goken suddenly performs a flying uppercut punch, impressing his students. After their morning training, the group walk back. Goken tells Ryu and Ken to trek up the mountains and meditate at the highest waterfall for their afternoon training. But this pisses Ken off as he's been training for over 7 years and still hasn't learned the secret techniques that his master occasionally performs. However, his master threatens him to a fight, so out of fear, he and Ryu obey their master and leave. While heading to the mountains, they stop at a field to rest. Ken, who comes from a rich family, then informs Ryu about his plans about leaving Japan to go back home, as he feels his training is no longer progressing. But Ryu, who's been training with Goken ever since he was a kid, tells his friend to think about it for a day before making such a big decision. Ken agrees to his friend's requests, and the two head to the waterfalls to meditate. Later, Ryu, with Ken behind, decides to approach his master to ask him to teach him the ways of the Ansatsuken techniques. Both Ryu and Ken explain further that they've already mastered all the basics and are ready for the next level of their training, seeing the passion and the fire in them. He tells him to meet him in the dojo the next morning to begin their new training. When morning comes around, the two students eagerly wait for their master to arrive. This is when they find a map given to them by Goken. On this map, there are coordinates to a place far, far away, so the two gear up and start their hike. After 5 days of hiking, they finally arrive at an abandoned dojo in the middle of nowhere. In the dojo, they finally meet their master and their next level of training begins. Goken introduces the first 3 techniques of Ansatsuken: Shoryuken, a flying uppercut punch; Tatsumaki, a spinning tornado kick; and Hadouken, a key fireball attack. Ryu and Ken first begin practicing the Shoryuken technique with their master, but soon learn that there's another faster and easier way to master these techniques when their master accidentally mentions it. However, Goken doesn't tell him much about it and tells him that this other method is forbidden, and changes the subject by telling him to just focus on the current method he's teaching. Now one day, Ken enters a room in the dojo and finds a book filled with the forbidden method his master had warned him about. Just then, Ryu comes into the room, so Ken secretly takes and hides the book in his gi clothing. Ryu and Ken then find pictures of a mysterious fighter who had trained with their master a long time ago. After many weeks of training, Goken decides to put his students to a sparring battle with each other to see how much they had progressed. Soon, Ryu and Ken begin sparring. Ken ends up applying the techniques well and easily defeats Ryu. Impressed with how fast Ken had learned the techniques, Goken rewards him by showing him a glimpse of the Hadouken technique. This impressed the boys, firing him up for their future trainings ahead. Now the next day, Ryu and Ken begin their training, practicing the Hadouken. Ken quickly gets frustrated with the training after being unable to create a ki ball, as well as Ryu, who easily creates one with the master's techniques. So carefully, he takes out his secret book of the dark arts and starts using it, and easily achieves a powerful ki ball with the forbidden technique. He then shows off his new skills to Ryu, but Goken sees the forbidden technique and immediately asks Ken to find him in the dojo. He asks where he had learned that dark technique from, so Ken unwillingly hands over the book he had found. Goken reveals to Ken that the methods being used in that book is dark art and can corrupt the mind with evil if he continues to use it. He tells Ken not to tell Ryu about this book and asks him to leave. Goken then burns away the book with his ki. That night, Ryu gets a nightmare of a dark figure approaching him. He's then awakened by Ken, who tells him to get dressed for a fun night in the town. Ken brings Ryu to a club to find some girls, but unlike his horny friend, Ryu gets distracted by a street fight happening outside the club. Both of them go to watch the fight, but soon, a couple of guys start insulting him, so Ken bets him 10,000 yen that Ryu can easily beat their best fighter. Ryu hesitates to fight at first, but Ken pushes his friend in the arena. With no choice, Ryu defeats his opponent easily. The two then celebrate with some drinks and leave. The next morning at the dojo, Ryu and Ken prepare for their training, but to Ken's surprise, he sees his father. His father tells him to come home because he misses him, but Ken doesn't want to and tells his father that he has to finish what he started. Respecting that decision, his father allows his son to stay, and the two of them, together with Ryu, have one last training session together before leaving. The next day, they continue their training to master the Hadouken, where Goken tells his students to try firing a Hadouken at each other. After some back and forths, Ryu manages to create a ki ball powerful enough to be shot. His master tells him to shoot the fireball at Ken, but Ryu hesitates and leaves instead. Now that night, Ryu sneaks outside to practice the Hadouken alone. With no one around, Ryu fires a ki blast to the unknown, but Ken suddenly shows up and gets hit by it. A worried Ryu takes him to Gouken, so their master quickly revives him back to life, giving Ryu relief. Now one day, while Ryu and Ken have gone to the jungle to get some water, the mysterious fighter, who had trained with Gouken many years ago, comes to find him. He asks Gouken to fight him as he wants to prove that he is the better fighter. It's then revealed that the mysterious fighter is called Akuma, and he's Gouken's brother. Gouken and Akuma had a father, who was the grandmaster of the Ansatsuken techniques, who taught both of them how to fight. But after always feeling like he's never as good as his brother, Akuma decided to use the dark arts to learn those techniques. But this forbidden method corrupted his mind and caused him to be evil. Akuma ended up murdering his father, and now he wants to do the same to his brother to prove that he's the best fighter. Of course, Gouken refuses to fight his brother and tries to help him to get back to his sanity. But just then Ryu and Ken arrive. Akuma takes the opportunity and threatens Gouken by telling him that if he doesn't fight him, he'll murder his two students. Fearing for Ryu and Ken's safety, Gouken arranges a different day to fight his brother, so Akuma leaves, awaiting for that final fight. Gouken then decides to ghost Akuma by taking Ryu and Ken away to a secret place. 1 year later, it's revealed that Ryu and Ken have mastered all the techniques of Ansatsuken the right way, so their proud master tells them that it's time for them to find their own path, and he gives them one final mission. He tells them to leave the dojo and live in the jungles alone, and after 3 days come back to the dojo to fight each other until one of them either gives up or gets defeated. The two boys wish each other luck and leave for their journey separately for the next 3 days. In the following days, Ryu and Ken can both be seen training hard for their fights against each other, increasing their powers respectively. Finally, 3 days have passed, and the two meet up at the dojo for their anticipated fight. After wishing each other luck, the two friends begin the fight. After many exchanges between them, Ryu defeats Ken with a powerful Shuriken punch. But this attack sends a wave of dark energy to their master, shocking him. When Ken wakes up, he sees Ryu filled with evil energy. So in order to stop him, Ken uses a fiery Shuriken punch on Ryu, knocking him out. Ken quickly takes Ryu to their master. Gouken then learns that Ryu has somehow contacted the powers of the evil arts without even learning it. So worried that Akuma had sensed Ryu's dark energy and is afraid that he'll take him away, Gouken tells Ryu and Ken to leave this place as their training is completed. The two boys say their goodbyes to their master and leave, with a proud Gouken in tears. A few days after Ryu and Ken leave, Akuma tracks down the evil energy Ryu had created and finds Gouken. The movie ends with the two brothers preparing for battle. Always a pleasure having you guys around. Thanks for watching. Like and subscribe if you had a good time today, and get ready for the next one.